The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
A March Madness post-game edition of the program with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Tennessee does manage to advance by beating Louisiana, but there definitely were some touch-and-go moments late in that game. Caleb, let's go ahead and get rolling. For those on board, we greatly appreciate it. Hit the thumbs up button. Let's bring some more people in. Get your thoughts on the message board. Be sure and retweet if you're watching on Twitter. Share, subscribe if you haven't before to Off the Hook Sports and our YouTube channel, which we're pretty proud of. So, Caleb, let's get to it. That didn't look like it was going to be a game for well over a half, and then suddenly it became a bit of a ball game. I did think at one point that Tennessee could let that slip away. It was a brief moment. I didn't think that Tennessee was going to let it slip away for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, as it was within a couple of possessions, but Tennessee let that one get a lot closer than it should have been.
Yeah, this game is everything I've always criticized about college basketball. It's what I hate about the sport because it was just mediocrity on mediocrity on mediocrity. And it's everything we've always criticized about Rick Barnes, which is the team is prone to dry spells that are just unheard of. They scored, I want to say, 10 points in the final 10 minutes. They didn't score a field goal in the final 5 minutes. Neither team shot better than 60% from the free throw line. Now, I'm going to give credit where credit's due because Louisiana shot horrible from 3, and that's what they needed to do to win. They were 6 of 18. I won't say that's horrible. That was below average, and they had to shoot better than that. And that had a lot to do with Tennessee's defense and the switching that they were doing on the perimeter. And down low, Jonas Aidoo got 2 blocks. They knew to let Jordan Brown get his points. But I think largely this was a game where it's not a win worth celebrating if you're Tennessee. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Maybe not a win worth celebrating, but let me get on the other side of that, Caleb. And I agree with most everything you said, but let me get on the other side. The other side is that you're going to play ugly sometimes in March. You need to advance. I know it's technically a 1-possession game. 58-55 was the final, but I mean, really, that felt more like a 2-possession game. I don't think anybody ever really thought that Louisiana was going to be able to close it up and take the lead in the final few seconds. It didn't feel like that at all. You also have Santiago Vescovi, who did not play his best game. I think he'd be the first to tell you that. And you're still dealing with life after Zakai Ziegler. So while Tennessee did not play its best game, and everything you said about Rick Barnes' approach is frustrating for Tennessee fans and fans of college basketball that want to see the game go up and down the court a little bit more. And my goodness, they shot a lot of long twos. You do survive in advance. And at the end of the day, that is what it's all about in March. Other teams didn't today. Virginia, ask them.
No, you're right. That's absolutely true. The goal is to survive in advance. Even in scores and games in the 50s. That's what you're right. And if you watch today, I mean, a team that beat Tennessee earlier in the year, Arizona, lost to Princeton. Just so everybody knows, Arizona was my national championship pick.
There you go. She goes that bracket.
And that's gone. So you are right about that. I think the ultimate goal is just survive in advance. I just think that, again, it was so – I think what's weird about this is – if this was a Tennessee team that hadn't looked like this all year, I might think a little bit differently going into the round of 32. But like every concern you could ever have about Tennessee was on display in this game. And they won because they played a worse team by every stretch of the imagination. That even Ron Slay admitted today was a dream matchup for Tennessee. A lesser team that's a dream matchup. And they had
I thought physically that just watching those two teams on the court, if you watch those two teams play for 5 minutes, you're like, well, one team is far advanced physically. Skill set wise, Yeah, I think Tennessee has a better skill set as a whole, but we really didn't see it tonight. The three-point shooting was practically non-existent, and then Tennessee had depth on them as well. So, again, you just didn't see the kick out from the post position to make people have to collapse down, even though the post was pretty significant tonight and productive for Tennessee. You didn't see. I thought Louisiana, for the record, was very well coached. You didn't see them collapse down. They stayed on the outside to keep Tennessee from getting hot. But certainly Tennessee's some of their post players made them pay. But Euros in particular. But when you don't have Vescovi really show up, and he was one of three for 3 points. My goodness, Caleb, without, and what do we say when we go into March? It's all about guard play. That's said all the time. So you don't have Ziegler and Vescovi doesn't show up. I mean, that's a recipe for getting bounced by a Ragin Cajuns team or a team that's slightly better than them. And they didn't, and they advanced. So I'll again, we'll give them credit for that.
Does this raise concerns, do you think, of what we've talked about with Vescovi in the past, which is he shrinks in the big moments? Or do you think that was Louisiana's defense and the way they schemed it?
No, I think that's very fair. I mean, I think the fact that it would be one thing if he stepped up and he shot 13 threes and he didn't hit them all and it was an off night. But it's another thing when there are times where he seemed too willing to give up the ball. And perhaps that's his team finding its identity. But it just, you shoot or shoot. He's a shooter. That's what he is. He doesn't make an impact on the game like so many other players can with offensive rebounds and that sort of thing and distributing the ball like the guy Ziegler could and playing defense and bringing energy. He's a shooter. He's got to shoot it. So I feel like he's a little bit torn. He brought the ball up a good portion of the game today, and they switched that up. But I feel like he's a little bit torn between being a distributor now with Ziegler out and being a scorer. And he's got to get that figured out like in 48 hours.
Yeah, you're right. He does. I guess the kindest thing we can maybe say for Tennessee and Rick Barnes is maybe Rick Barnes has some plans on how he's going to utilize Vescovi that he didn't want to show against Louisiana, that he'd rather wait to show against Duke. I don't know what those are.
But see, to your point, they play games so tight and they're so defensive oriented. I don't think you can ever play the hide and seek game because you'll end up losing. I mean, really, in this game, if it was to hide Vescovi, if that's what they were going for, and they put themselves within a possession of losing, that's not a good game plan at all.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And I just got to be honest. It's like I challenge people because I used to hear this a lot from. There's a lot of areas that are more college, particularly areas that are college centric, consistently say college basketball is better than the NBA. I challenge people who watch this game tonight to say that. When you can watch a game where both teams, where you can shoot 57% from the free throw line and still win, I mean, this is what's wrong with the sport. And the only reason is because Louisiana shot worse from the free throw line. Like, this is, I'm sorry, it frustrates me to no end. And people act like this is, it's not at Tennessee. This is my rant about the sport. This is not a good sport. The play in college basketball is bad. It's just bad. And no one wants to acknowledge that.
Well, Travis said, man, if we could shoot free throws, it sure would help us. You're right. 57%. You get yourself in that type of situation in which it becomes a game in the second half that it never should have been. You've got to hit your free throws and knock those down and be able to keep an opposing team, especially an underdog team, at bay. Now, we've poked fun or criticized the game, the style of the game, Rick Barnes' approach, Tennessee's play tonight. But in all fairness, let's take a look at the first half and the way you come out and set the tone. I do think you have to give Tennessee a lot of credit for that. I think they turned it into a physical half-court game that fit what they like to do. Now, you've criticized what they like to do, and I'm usually right along with you. But at least they dictated play, and in the first half, they had a substantial lead. They sat on it a little too long. But I'll give them credit for how they came out and played in the first half for sure, because it didn't look like it was going to be a game at all at halftime.
No, you're right. And as a matter of fact, there's a legitimate argument that their style, at least on the defensive end, kind of stay consistent throughout. I know Louisiana scored a lot more in the second half than the first. I think a lot of there was just some factors that kind of went into that. I didn't really see any changes in Tennessee's defense in the second half. I thought Louisiana just hit a few more shots. I think they had a smart strategy. They kind of played Louisiana the way a lot of teams played them, which was the way they said was, we're going to let them go down low to Jordan Brown, but we're not going to let anybody else do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what they did. And they were committed to making sure they didn't get caught napping on the, with Louisiana's players on the perimeter. And I agree. The first half, they played very well, but that's been the criticism of Rick Barnes' team since he's been in Knoxville, is that they play well for stretches, and then they just have these stretches where they're just, the offense just is completely lost. And I mean, that was the whole final 10 minutes. There wasn't a saving grace in the last 10 minutes of that game for their offense. There's not 1 minute you can point to where like, oh, this offense played great. And by the way, they got bailed out by a couple of questionable calls, the last few minutes.
Yeah, I give you questionable. I would hate to be in Louisiana and hear their talk show saying that they got robbed of the game by the officials. I don't think that was the case. There were some close calls. I'll give you that. And I do feel like Tennessee had another gear if they had to have it. Now, the question is that gear defensively where they get a stop and then you never know, somebody could hit a fluky three and suddenly the game's tied? Because I don't know where the other gear is offensively. In other words, I don't think Tennessee played their best down the stretch. But, to me, it's just for a team that has experience, I think the head-scratching thing about this, and maybe it is as simple as Ziegler. Please hit the thumbs up button. We greatly appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed yet to Off the Hook Sports, do that. The button's right there. But the thing that's befuddling to me is with this team that has so much experience, they just look like they were kind of bouncing around in the second half and didn't have a real answer for that. Was it a 15-0 run? I mean, or 14-0? It was right at that. To me, to not have an answer for that when you had some successful play in the post, I mean, let's face it, accept it for what it is, Caleb. It's 1950s, 1960s Boston Celtics basketball. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, but at least those teams would throw it down to Bill Russell repeatedly at the end of the game. And I felt like Tennessee could have done that, and they kind of panicked a little bit when the game got close.
Well, they panicked because if you were going to compare it to the 60 Celtics, yes, they could throw it to Bill Russell.
Oh, yeah, Bob Cousy. Yeah.
How many Hall of Fame guards were on that team that you knew if Bill Russell was covered, he could kick it out to just one of like 7? And so, I think that you're right. This team is constructed like that. I think they're a little bit lost on what to do without Zakai. And I think they're kind of lost on what to do in the post because I don't think they have a true post scorer, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. I guess Euros had his moments today, but I think if they had a true post scorer, then what we talk about so often, people would have to collapse down and then the three-point shooters would be open. And I thought really defensively too, which we haven't talked about. For the most part, you would say what giving up mid-50s is a successful night defensively. But I really thought, and this particularly, I think this because of Ziegler's absence, they were still trying to find themselves. It's been roughly, 2 weeks since Ziegler hurt his knee and was out for the year. I still think they are mixing in man and zone and showing a lot of defensive looks for themselves as much as to confuse the other team. I think they're trying to find out what works best on defense. And again, they've got about 44 hours to figure that out.
No, yeah, that's very true. And the other thing is they can't press the way they want to because there's not anybody that can affect. If you have Ziegler and Josiah out together, which you never really did have them on the court together this year, you can really run a effective press, but you can't run that right now. There's just not enough athletes out there to do that. And they have to win with their half court defense. And I think they're a little bit lost. I'll give a positive, by the way. because anybody who's tracked Josiah Jordan James the way I have is Josiah Jordan James was awful shooting from three against Missouri, and he was awful shooting from three tonight, which means he's going to be great shooting from three on Saturday.
I'll light it up against Duke. This basketball team is probably in a different place had Ziegler gotten hurt a month before, where they can kind of create their own new identity. They're certainly better off if he's there. But again, defensively, I mean, was this an elite performance, or was this just an overmatched team, or a little bit of both?
I think it was elite only in the sense of it was elite scheming. I'll say that. It was elite scheming. You saw the way Rick Barnes really kind of schemed, where they got around picks, they got around switches they switched well, to make sure that every 3-point shot was contested. And I think that was the key in this game. We talked about this earlier in the week. Louisiana doesn't shoot a lot of threes, but they shoot them efficiently. And that was always a threat. And they used that to make sure that they could be dominant down low with Jordan Brown. Rick Barnes and everybody were like, okay, we'll let Jordan Brown get his points to a degree, but we're going to trust Jonas Adu to do his thing. And to his credit, he had a couple of blocks. And just make sure the 3-point game is taken away completely. And so I give credit to the scheming of that. I do have to say that and give him credit on that.
A post on the message board says Duke is going to beat us badly. I've covered enough tournaments where I know that these things can take a 180-degree turn in the 48 hours between the two games. So neither would surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if Duke, who I think's got 3 first-round draft picks after watching them today, more extensively than I had previously. It wouldn't surprise me if Duke won by 30. It wouldn't surprise me if Tennessee upset Duke in a mid-50s to high 50s type of game. But as of this point, I just think it's a team that's unfortunately still finding itself without Ziegler. And if you talk about Vescovi shrinking from big moments, it's going to be a lot bigger moment on Saturday night against Duke, a blue blood. This is a game that if you have an issue with shrinking away from big moments, you should be able to put that aside, because it's the first game of the tournament and you're a better basketball team. So that what you said earlier was, I think, very apt and very disconcerting for Tennessee fans.
Yeah, I agree. Particularly, he's the only reliable scorer they have. So if he shrinks in big moments, it's a lesser version of J.J. Redick, who had a bad habit of shrinking in big moments when he was at Duke. If you remember whenever a lot of the book, if you remember, Duke never won a title with J.J. Redick, even though he was such a legendary player, that J.J. Redick, Sheldon Williams thing. And the book was out, which was that, I remember this back in the day. The book was, if you get Sheldon Williams in foul trouble, they can't win in the tournament. And sure enough, I want to say, I believe it was LSU in the Sweet 16 that used Big Baby Davis and Tyus Thomas to bang up Sheldon Williams and get him in foul trouble. The pressure was on JJ. Duke lost. I wonder with Vescovi.
Yeah, but if you ask Vescovi to be, for the most part, a spot-up shooter like J.J. Redick was, and he had open shots all the time, maybe Vescovi could do that a lot easier. I mean, because he doesn't get the open looks. I think of J.J. Redick being wide open half the time because of Sheldon and other players that pulled off coverage. When I think of Redick, I think of that guy. Now, he was more than a spot-up shooter, but mainly he was a spot-up shooter. If you ask Vescovi to do that, even potentially at the 3, and you had a driving 2 guard, and you had a guy like Ziegler, obviously, to distribute, I think Vescovi would be a different player. I think they're trying to get something out of him right now that he's not. And that's just a natural scorer that can go down and create buckets and make things happen on his own. And I just don't know that he's ever going to be that player.
No, you're right. He's not. Sadly, he might have, because of that, this year he might have killed his NBA draft stock. I thought he was at least a high second rounder last year. I don't know if he's going to get drafted now.
You know what's funny is I think he'll go to the NBA and they'll make him a spot up shooter and he'll have a successful NBA career. I really do.
That might be true.
I don't think they're going to ask him to bring the ball up. I don't think they're going to do a lot of those things. I think he's kind of going to be a guy that is able to get shots at potentially the 3 position on the wing. Travis saying what goes up must come down. If Tennessee going to go to the Final Four, they have to beat Duke. They do. And these are the type of matchups that you want. These are program builders where you're on national television on a Saturday night against Duke. So go out and show what you got and at least keep it close. And this helps you in recruiting down the line, whether or not it's Rick Barnes that benefits from that or not. One thing I would suggest, and Tennessee did this toward the end of the game, and I don't know why they don't do this all the time with their depth. I'm not talking about press, okay? They only did that for, 4 or 5 possessions. But I'm talking about the soft press that takes a little bit of time off the clock. If your goal is to win in the mid to high 50s, then you need to take all the time off the clock you can. So just soft press it and make them walk it up instead of sprint it up. And the other thing you have to give Tennessee credit for, and this has been a staple, they don't give up a lot of breakaway points. They don't get a lot either, but they don't give up a lot. Jenny's saying the refs were awful. What did you think of the refs? I kind of thought they helped Tennessee. Jenny, do you mean the refs were awful for Tennessee or Louisiana? I thought they helped the Cajuns a little bit.
I didn't think they were awful. I thought there were a couple of close calls that tended to go Tennessee's way. So I'm with you. I thought they definitely helped Tennessee more than they helped Louisiana, but I wouldn't say awful either way on that.
Now they were awful as a whole. I will give you that. And somebody needs to cut their nails. Whoever's scratching Muskogee, and there was another Tennessee player that was bleeding, you got to cut your nails before you play basketball. You just do, because you're going to call somebody, and you got to cut your nails. Nobody makes Muskogee bleed his own blood.
Oh, dodgeball. I get the reference. Love it.
Thank you.
Love it.
Thank you, White. But yeah, okay. So let's look forward a little bit. Plenty to talk about with this game, and we'll do so at 10 a.m. as well on Friday. It'll be a football Friday with Fred too. We'll talk to Fred White. We love doing that. But let's look forward to Duke a little bit. Let me put the odds at 1-3. They win. What do you think? You're the gambling guy. What do you think the spread will be? What do you think are Tennessee's chances? I would imagine that Tennessee was a 10-point favorite last I heard tonight. Duke played really well, but I don't think the number is going to move that much off a game versus Oral Roberts. So I think Duke will be favored somewhere in the realm of 7.5 points.
Yeah, I could see that. Here's where I go with this game is that look, it's not like Duke shot Oral Roberts out of the gym. They didn't. If you watch the game, I mean, they had the link. They out rebounded them, and then their defense in the paint was incredible. I don't know if that's necessarily the formula to beat Tennessee. It could be. I mean, it absolutely could be. I'm not saying that Duke won't win that. I don't think it's like an easy formula where Duke win. I haven't seen this type of matchup yet for Tennessee, I guess is where I'm going. So I'm a little bit curious on how it works out, because Duke, they have pretty good size. They out-rebounded Oral Roberts by like 14, but I think that was because Oral Roberts missed a lot of shots, but not from three, just from point-blank range, although they did shoot a lot of three-pointers too. They just missed everywhere in the game. And so Tennessee's not going to play the same game Oral Roberts did. A lot of the NCAA tournament with these smaller schools, as you know, Dave, they know they're outmatched. So they say, let's shoot as many threes as possible and pray enough of them go in to make it close. And that's what Oral Roberts did against Duke.
No, which isn't a bad strategy. I would just say this, just remember, and Travis saying defense beat Louisiana, defense will beat Duke. Well, that's what they're going to have to do. I mean, they're going to have to not only defend the post, but they're going to have to extend and defend some much better shooters they saw in Louisiana tonight. Travis, you said Duke favored 2.5. Is that official, or is that your guess? That seems low to me. But if you've seen that, give me some confirmation. I would appreciate that. And another post, Duke hasn't seen a defense like Tennessee yet. Tennessee defense can suffocate you. Caleb, I think I'm curious if you agree with this, because I was thinking about you earlier today. I think about you a lot. And that's sweet.
I love what you were thinking.
If this were the NBA, and these were best of sevens. How much more would you like Tennessee's chances, considering they're a defensive team?
A lot more.
Me too.
A lot more.
Yeah.
I was that's been my mantra that was my mantra when they were number 2, is that like I think that best of 7 series used to favor Tennessee. I think it's a little bit more balanced in the NBA now because Golden State has kind of rewritten the narrative. But I still think largely the defense can win championships. You know this from the 90s. I mean, how many games were just in the 80s in the NBA playoffs during that time, and just bad shooting, and because they were gassed from an 82-game season. And
well, there's a lot of good, tough defense being played as well. Let's not completely shortchange those guys, but
well, they allowed you to play tough defense back then.
Exactly.
That I always defend the game because they're like, oh, they don't play any defense. And I'm like, well, you really can't. Like, the players can't play defense the way they probably would want to. And I'll say this because people talk about. I will say this. I wonder what Vegas is going to do, because you brought up Travis said Duke 2.5. Right before this game ended, there was a line that said Duke -2, Duke -2. So I don't know, but you're right. These things are not scientific. I mean, we've covered football where 1 week. Results of 2 games 1 week would tell you that one thing's going to happen the next week, and the exact opposite. The one standout to me is in football. You probably remember this. 2004, Tennessee gets blown out by Auburn. Georgia blows out LSU. Kevin Burnett guarantees a win at Georgia.
That's it. Yeah. He guaranteed a win and guaranteed that they would be back in the SEC championship, right?
Yeah, he did. He said, we'll see Auburn again, was his quote.
Yeah.
And you're going to beat Georgia the next week. Nobody saw that coming. That's how sports, if that could work in football when you got a week to prepare, you best believe it could happen in basketball when you only got 2 days to prepare.
Jenny said, I live right outside of Orlando. I'm sad I didn't know they were playing here. I would have tried to go tonight. Well, that's why you got to hit the subscribe button and the like button, Jenny, and we'll have your information each and every weekday at 10 a.m. I think we mentioned Orlando and how much I hate that. So, but mostly it's a Disney thing. Bob said closest opponents compared to Duke is Kentucky, and Tennessee just doesn't match up with Kentucky. Duke, who knows who shows up for Tennessee? Travis verified that DraftKings has Duke 2.5. Does that surprise you? That I thought it would at least be 5.
That does shock me. So it was 2 right before the game ended, and so moving to 2.5. That is. To Vegas's credit, they're not overreacting. It's what you're bringing up, Dave. They're not overreacting to just one day's worth of games, and they're never going to be the ones to do that, honestly. So, I think there might. I think there might. Maybe there's an upset brewing. Am I talking myself into it?
Well, let me ask you this: for that to happen, give me 1, 2, 3 things that absolutely has to happen against Duke.
Santiago Vescovi can't shrink is one.
That's the only one on my board.
It
really is. You took the one I have and continue with yours, but that's the only one. If that one does not happen, Tennessee has 0 chance. If he does rise to the occasion, they've got a chance. So continue with yours, but that's my one. You took one.
My second one. If he does it. If he doesn't shrink, and then my second one, then if this happens, I think they actually win. Josiah Jordan-James has to have one of those games that he has once every 3 or 4 games where he just goes off. And we saw that against Ole Miss in the SEC tournament. He's very capable of that. And it happens every other game, or it usually happens every other game, but he's had 2 straight games where he has not shot well from 3, meaning Josiah is due for one of those games where he goes off.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I would just say this. Just remember, Tennessee fans, this is not football, even though this was an elimination game. Tennessee could still make a special run, even though I don't think they played particularly well tonight. And know that you're not Virginia. You're not one of the other teams that got upset and bounced out. And there were a couple of other teams, I believe it was Houston, that played one of their players with I think he had a pulled groin hamstring issue. And then Brandon Miller for Alabama looked pretty rough today. So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. There, as of tonight, there are 40 some teams left because 16 get eliminated. So
there'll be 48 teams left. Yeah.
Yeah, 48 teams. So you're still one of those teams, and you're going to be one of 32, and you have an opportunity with one win that would be pretty historic to be in the Sweet 16. So let me ask you this. How historic would this win be if it's just that? If Tennessee beats Duke and they don't go any further, Sweet 16, but a Duke win on the resume in the tournament, how big is that historically for the Vols?
I mean,
It's Duke.
I know I say we talked about this with Josh Ward earlier in the day. I say that's their second best NCAA tournament win ever.
And the
first would be Ohio State, the one they won to get to the Elite Eight. Bruce Pearl's 5th year there.
Right.
This would be the second best one that they've had. I mean, they didn't just get. It'd be their 8th trip to the Sweet 16. It'd only be their 4th where they beat anybody higher than a 7 seed. I want to say. I think 7 seed. One of those was against UConn, which you have brought up. That was UConn defending national champs, but if you brought up, UConn was injured that game.
Khalid El-Amin had the bad ankle.
Yeah, so that was totally by default to a certain degree. This wouldn't be that. This would be like, I know what Slay was talking about today, where it's not the same mystique with Coach K, but John Shire is a Coach K.
Still feels like Duke to me. Still feels like they got 3 first-rounders to me.
No, I agree. I was thinking the same thing. And the reason it feels like Duke, if you remember this, Coach K was the only coach who took the conference tournament seriously. He made a point to win the conference tournaments. John Shire was exactly the same way with Duke this year.
I mean, the only real difference I've seen so far, and it's a small sample size, is that the players are now forced with Mike Krzyzewski gone. They have to dog cuss themselves. So since he's not around to do that. You're sat next to a bench with him on it. Cover your ears. That guy likes to cuss some players.
Krzyzewski does?
Yes, you would never think that, would you? He's a Bobby Knight disciple.
Yeah, I know he was a Knight disciple. He reminds me. So my grandfather always.
I'll go ahead and tell you, your grandfather's nicer than Mike Krzyzewski.
No. My late grandfather had 2 favorite coaches. He was Mike Krzyzewski and Phil Jackson. And he liked them because he always liked how calm they looked on the sidelines, no matter what. He basically had the point of Mike Krzyzewski always struck me as the female Pat Summitt, where Pat Summitt didn't seem like she went off on you. It seemed like the way she looked at you scared you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Krzyzewski did, but the curses were quiet enough where you couldn't hear them. Remember Bruce Pearl early on caught some heat for being too loud, and people heard some stuff.
Well, Bruce Pearl was loud for show, though. That's
yeah, but he quickly realized that it was the South and maybe that language. Krzyzewski would say it quiet enough, or even in a quiet auditorium, but Cameron's never quiet, that he would get away with it, and it'd be the bleep bleep. And I'm serious. That happened all the time, and they had one regional game that I covered. It didn't involve Tennessee, but it was in Thompson-Boling Arena, and I'd heard that going in, and sure enough, that's when you had great seats right on the sidelines instead of off to the side or off to the end lines. And he's a cursor, but he's gone. Duke still looks pretty talented to me. And if we get to the Sweet 16, I like the matchup against Purdue. Hold on there, message board. It's Duke. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. And Bob says Duke win would make them 9-9 all time in NCAA tournament all time. Is that right? 500 is a big deal for Tennessee. I don't know that it would make Tennessee 9-9. We'll look that up before the show tomorrow at 10. Bob, be sure and you got your notifications on so that you'll get those when we go live at 10 Eastern every weekday. I do know that it pulls Rick Barnes to 500. So in the NCAA tournament, which is nothing really to brag about.
No, it's really given the number of times he's been there. No,
yeah. Being at Texas, being at Tennessee, being at programs that are usually better. So
also to bring it up, you got to get a little excited. Don't just get ahead with Tennessee needing to beat Duke. Purdue's got to beat Memphis, and Memphis just won the Atlantic, beating the number 1 team in the nation. And
how cool of a run. Let's just say this, because this game was not exciting at all. But you get past this game, you play Duke, and maybe you play Memphis.
That would be such a great run.
I mean, maybe that somebody brought that up to me today, and Hardaway and Rick Barnes hate each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be gold, Jerry. Gold to make a Seinfeld reference. That would be unbelievably incredible. At that point, as a guy who likes to do content, win or lose, it's a win for Dave and Caleb.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's
If you beat Duke and you play Memphis, Caleb, the rest is gravy.
I mean, I will tell you, being from Memphis, I love my hometown. I'm a Grizzly fan. I love the city. I think I defended against the state more than most people. But I will say one of the things that makes me laugh is when Tiger fans tried to pretend that they view Tennessee in basketball the way Tennessee views Memphis in football. I'm like, no, it's not the same. It's a legit rivalry in basketball. It's not a rivalry in football. It's a one-sided affair where one team is on a different level and has a bunch of other bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, and always will be. I mean, Memphis is always going to be in football. I have not. When you do mega conference, they're not even going to be brought up.
They can't get into a Power 5 now.
Yeah.
They're not going to get into a mega conference.
So Jenny's saying if we play Memphis, we have to win. She's from Memphis. Jenny, you have all kinds of ties to this Tennessee basketball team. You're in Orlando. I mean, you better have the notifications on to be listening to our program on a daily basis. I'm going to go ahead and make that promise right now. Travis, we do have an app. Just if you want to go to your app store, Off the Hook Sports, you can search for that. And it's really cool because we set it up where all of Caleb's videos that he cuts up throughout the day are right there. So you can listen to what you want to after we talk about a bunch of stuff and bloviate at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And you can pick what you want to hear about. Jenny says, I went to Tennessee. I get it. Jenny's all over the place. Go to the Duke game, Jenny. We'll get you a credential. Anything else you want to add?
Wait, I wonder if Jenny was she had to be a Magic fan then in the 90s if she was living in Orlando then, because remember when Penny Hardaway's from Memphis, was playing for the Magic at that time. Like everybody in Memphis, their favorite team was Orlando. Dave, you're going to find this hilarious because of my coming of age. I was coming of age into sports like 7 or 8 years old. It shocked me when I found out Michael Jordan was a more beloved player than Penny Hardaway. It actually shocked me because the first player I knew was Penny Hardaway because he was such a big deal in Memphis. And that Orlando team was the only team that eliminated Michael Jordan in his prime from the playoffs.
Right. Yeah. Penny was more, obviously, this. Penny was more like Magic than he was Jordan.
Yeah.
But I just thought Shaq leaving was kind of a heartbreaker because I thought they had something neat going there. And it's nice to see some of the smaller market teams do that. And Jenny says, yes, I'm a Magic's fan, but now I'm a Grizzlies fan.
I'm right there with you, Jenny.
Yes.
Grizz fan.
So as long as Ja Morant doesn't pull an eye on somebody, you guys are both good. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, you're hoping for 8-game suspension for taking a gun on the road and having it at a strip joint.
And
what
it's not.
the world is going on.
I think the Grizzlies are making a mistake here because I think they're trying to get him back for the playoffs, and I'm like, I think sacrifice this year with the playoffs and force Ja to get his mind right because it's good for Ja. It's good for the Grizzlies. I don't think it's good to do this fake PR thing of checking into a rehab facility for one day in Florida.
Well, and how about being interviewed by somebody other than Jalen Rose, like with some real credentials? Okay, yeah. I mean that whole thing was
every question was like, so I understand, and I
get it. I get it. I hate when people say that because when you say I get it, it means that they're kind of saying I'm smarter than you. You don't have to tell me what you were about to tell me. That is my pet peeve. I get it, Caleb. Drives me insane. So we'll have the game broken down 10 a.m. tomorrow. We do have the app. Go ahead and get your notifications on. It is March Madness time, and it's exciting. SEC football, I had a question. We talk about the Lady Vols. Yes, we absolutely do. We talk about the Lady Vols, and we will do so tomorrow on the program. I'm of the mindset that it's time to give Kelly Harper a brand new big fat contract, and a lot of people are going to think that's crazy. We'll discuss that. And we may dive into Georgia being a rogue football program because that seems to get everybody excited on the YouTube channel.
Yes. Particularly, apparently, Jalen Carter was totally out of shape for his pro day. I don't know if you heard about that, but Jalen Carter was a little bit. Apparently, he's been eating some McDonald's passes.
Yeah, well, maybe, and everybody wants to bring up the bags of money that Jeremy Pruitt was handing out, and that's the defense of Georgia's program now. I'm telling you, they're going a little rogue. Just going to tell you. I mean, I've no dog in the fight, pun intended. It's getting a little wild. I mean, and I've seen this before with Philip Fulmer. They're coming off 2 championships, and I get that, but you give them a little bit too much leash and things can go wild. We've got people on the message board saying Kentucky's going to go on a deep run. Kentucky could win the tournament. There's still 25 teams, I think, that could win this tournament even after today, Caleb. So, all right, great stuff. We want to certainly thank you for tuning in. It's good to know you, Jenny. We now know she was born and raised in Memphis, but has been a Tennessee fan her whole life, and then said, "Thanks, Daddy." Am I Daddy? Is that another dodgeball reference? You must be Daddy.
Oh, I thought she was just thanking her father for being a Tennessee fan.
Oh,
for being. Jenny, you got to clarify on this.
Why would I go there and think I'm Daddy all of a sudden? No,
Jenny's last name is Hooker.
It says more about me than it says about Jenny. It says that I see myself somehow as Daddy. With Vince Vaughn with the necklace.
Okay, she broke it down.
Okay, no, my dad was a Tennessee. All right, that's good. All right, Caleb's your mama. I'm Daddy. Have a fantastic evening or morning, depending on when you're watching this. And don't forget, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We will be with you off the Hook Sports, and follow us on Twitter. Follow us on all the social media. Get your notifications on, because things about to get crazy too with Tennessee football. We'll have previews coming up, and it's a Football Friday with Fred. Former Vol Fred White will join us on Friday. That is always awesome. So thanks for staying up late with us. Have a fantastic evening. Tennessee Duke. We'll have it broken down on Friday on Off the Hook Sports. For Caleb Calhoun,